Alright, cut the music. Cut the epic music. So for today's video, I wanted to find an excuse to talk about, personally, one of my all-time favorite series. Little well-known indie title. I'll give you 3 guesses. First 2 don't count. I don't know how you'll deduce what it actually is. But yes, for today's video, I wanted to talk about Halo. And just to make it a little bit of degeneracy sprinkled in there and really make it interesting or not interesting depending on how you look at it. And to just give me the excuse to talk about it, I wanted to give a comparison to how each title in the Halo series would be determined as a dare. And for those uninitiated or uncultured swine that doesn't understand what a dare is, it typically means loving or affectionate, which for most of these games I do have a pretty fond feeling towards. However, there's normally a preceding part to that word, such as a tsundere or something like that, to further describe how the game shows its affection. So I figured for this video, I would briefly go through each one and give a description on the most suitable way that the game makes me feel and how it treats me back. That would be a matching description for its dare classification. So up first, Halo 1, Combat Evolved, the game that essentially put Xbox on the map and sold the systems like hotcakes even to this day. I would argue it is probably the most well-known title IP for Microsoft at this point, and anybody that doesn't recognize the Master Chief, I genuinely don't know how that's possible. But the game itself, it's definitely probably my personal least favorite. Unfortunately, it's rough around the edges. I would say it's the only one really in the series that just doesn't age all that well. It did get a touch up and it actually looks good, even though the remaster is already a decade old for this game. But that being said, it does play really rough. You're really strong in this game, but so are the enemies. So the balancing isn't terrible, but there's a lot of just jankiness with the levels. It's just not laid out very well. The game was gonna be an RTS over the top, and then it became first person, and then they just kind of were figuring it all out, and you can really feel the growing pains with this title. I would say this was probably the hardest one to classify for me personally, and I came to it last, funny enough. But I would have to say it's probably along the lines of a Doro Dare, which is more muddled and confused, kind of out there, not quite insane, but kind of just doesn't really know what it wants to be initially, and it's really just figuring it out. So it felt like the most appropriate, while not like fully committed to that. I couldn't really picture it being compared to any other type, but nonetheless, it's a great start to a series that literally only got better. Now this is absolute blasphemy, but I've never actually owned Halo 2 until it was actually put in the Master Chief Collection, aka Halo 2 Remake, featuring all the other Halos. That's essentially what this game is. But short and simple, you would think that Halo 2, I grew up on it, just playing it every night practically at a friend's house so many times, beating it and literally restarting it afterwards. All the difficulties other than Legendary, the highest difficulty, are playable, I think, for this game. That being said, Legendary is actually broken and brings out some of just the glaring issues that are with this game. It is insanely and just painfully unfair and unbalanced with so many of the mechanics and points that you get in this game. Unfortunately, I hate playing this game on Legendary. I would play any other one of them on the hardest difficulty other than this one. And I love 2. It has arguably one of the best stories. It's super intricate. There's so much going on and so many mechanics that them making it so ball-bustingly hard just kind of sucks, because it makes people just not want to play it as much. So it's kind of out of its fucking mind. This game is actually insane, and if you were able to guess already, I absolutely want to say that Halo 2 is a yandere. It wants you dead. I haven't felt a game want me killed more and faster than before the time I played World at War. It's ridiculous. I genuinely want to love this game, and I do, as long as it's not on Legendary. But my god, it's relentless, and I can't just let that be overseen. It doesn't get a free pass just because I do love it deep down. Halo 3, the cool kid of the class. Genuinely, if you were playing this in school, you were the cool kid. Everybody talked about Halo 3 when it came out, except for my broke ass who wasn't able to afford it until like legitimately I think 3 years later. So it was already gone by then, kind of. It never actually died, but I wasn't a part of it when it was in its major boom, unfortunately. I played the multiplayer, but that's about it. That being said, when I did get around to actually getting to play it, it really is just the cool kid. It's just calm and collected. It knows what it's doing, and it doesn't really it's not obnoxiously loud. It doesn't scream at you and beg you to play it. You want to come and approach it. This is easily Kudere, the cool, calm, cynical one that just kind of doesn't really look for your attention, and it just plays off everything cool, but it wants your attention, and it gets the attention. Custom games on this, solid. The campaign, phenomenal. The multiplayer, memorable as hell. I have no complaints about Halo 3. Other than the flood, I immediately eat my words. Fuck the flood. The first 3 immediately get docked points because there's flood in it. So following in the giant footsteps that have been made now with Halo 3, we have Halo 3 ODST. And this has to be a game I legitimately bought with my first Xbox that I was ever able to afford back in 2010, I believe. I actually think this is the copy that I bought with it, which is crazy. I still have it because I would just sell games to make money to buy the next one. So the fact that this stuck around means something. It's special to me. It's not as grandiose and epic as, say, Halo 3 or even 2 managed to pull off in its story, but it's very to itself. It's almost more silent, and it pays to be the strong silent type sometimes when it comes to ODST. You're not this super strong Spartan. Regardless, smooth jazz be damned, this game is great. I think a lot of people slept on it just because it didn't hold up to 3 itself, but it's genuinely a game that just kind of sits in the back and just minds its own business and doesn't really go looking for you either, but it gets overlooked because of its shy nature almost. It genuinely holds its place easily in this franchise, and I highly recommend anybody that sleeps on this one to give it another chance. It's so much fun. The story is actually interesting. It has almost a noir detective tone to it, walking the streets at night and discovering what's going on to catch up with your lost team as they get separated in the city. Legendary isn't actually cancer in this one. It's playable. There's no flood in it. It's great. I genuinely love ODST. The soundtrack, bar none, is a masterpiece. I have no complaints. That being said, you probably guess it, the shy, quiet type, minding its own business, this is a Dandere. For sure. Plain and simple. If Halo 2 is the FPS that ruled my childhood nostalgia, then Halo Reach is what took over my teenage nostalgia. My god, this game slaps hard. Genuinely, I think it's my personal favorite when it comes to the series, and it actually has nothing to do with Master Chief other than a little tidbit at the end. That being said, I genuinely have almost no complaints about this game. Even Legendary on solo it breaks you a little bit, but it's not unfair. When you lose, you kind of understand why you lost, or you just got outnumbered or outgunned. It's not insanely impossible the entire time. There's a couple hard sections, but that's it. The story, incredible. I love the story of Reach. The gameplay is amazing. They add innovative stuff that would become staples on. It's Bungie's send-off in their last one for the series before they passed it off to 343. And it's just great. Custom games in this is where it peaked. It genuinely hit a stride where we've been playing it recently now, and it's been just as much fun as it was a decade ago. That's insane. It actually blows my mind. I have nothing but love and affection for this game, and I felt like it was just a chef's kiss and just a good farewell for Bungie with this game. Absolutely love all around. Dere. But I will say, on top of that legendary, when it does decide to slap you around and be a little too relentless in some of those sections, it is a little bit of a bow dere, giving you a little arm punch or the like lump on the top of your head as it thumps you. It plays a little dirty sometimes, but overall this game is pretty close to a masterpiece. I love this game. I have almost no complaints about it. Please play Reach if you haven't. With Bungie's farewell letter with Halo Reach and the cliffhanger ending that was Halo 3, 343 Industries picks up the mantle and gives us a new saga continuing right off where it left. And honestly, this one was also kind of hard yet kind of easy to classify. Halo 4, I remember loving this game when it came out, but not quite as much as I wanted to. It's very odd because I don't remember having that many complaints. I just remember the story not being that memorable, and I replayed it recently just to like refresh myself, and it's still not stellar. I think the story still is forgettable, but it does have some moments in it that are actually pretty wild. I totally forgot about that I did like a lot, but overall it's just kind of mid. That being said, a lot of people I think just really do not like the new enemy types, the Prometheans, but personally I actually really like them gameplay wise. It's more that they have no personality that's super boring. Legendary isn't super broken in this, so it is time consuming a little bit, but it's not unfair most of the time. There's some instances that are just totally unnecessary, but this game overall, it felt like the way it made the community feel and then come back was just hate. I feel like people just didn't like it at first as much as they wanted to because they were comparing it to where it was coming from. But all these years later, now that it's had so much, almost a decade to like kind of sit in it, I think a lot of people fondly think back of Halo 4. And honestly, it going on into the future, you can see where the improvements were made. It's almost like 343's variant of Combat Evolved, where they were figuring out the growing pains and just kind of getting their foothold to go from there. You can very much see that going on, and a little bit of a stumble also, because there are some mistakes. I would say this is a tsundere for this game, just because it does seem mean with you based on how its perception of everything is. It's almost not even the actual game. It's almost like the atmosphere around it at the time, where it wanted you to like it, but like it didn't want to show any affection to it. So it just kind of told you like, this is what you're doing. So it's not necessarily mean or absolutely like soul crushing you to bully you around, but like it just does something new and you weren't sure about it until it warms up. And now I think fondly of Halo 4, surprisingly. 2012 me be damned. Halo 5 I don't actually own a physical copy because we've moved so swiftly from 4 into the next generation of consoles and everything and systems to digital, so I've never actually had the physical copy for 5. That being said, I really like 5 overall, but there is a metric shitload of things that were wrong with it, especially at launch and going on into the future. It's definitely one that just, what happened? The marketing for it was some of the coolest marketing I have seen for a game, and the build-up hype was incredible. It felt real for this one, and that hurt it. The marketing was so good that it didn't deliver on what it promised. The story was nothing like what it was being advertised. While it did stick to a foundation of the idea of what it was trying to do, it quickly just kind of abandoned that and went in its own path. A lot of stuff didn't really make sense unless you really knew the deeper lore of things. They introduced a lot of characters in this, which is cool. I have no real complaints about that. But if you're playing only the games, it doesn't make a ton of sense without a lot of background reading. That being said, gameplay-wise, solid. Even on Legendary, this game is very playable. The one caveat with the gameplay is they made one boss called the Warden in this, Warden Eternal. And I would say it was a boss one time and then it became a mini boss for the rest of the game that just kept reoccurring. And while that's not terrible in some games, this thing can literally one-shot you. every time it shows up. So the fact that it keeps showing up and with multiple at the same time is bullshit. It wasn't fun because you had to hide to fight it. You had to play in a way that was just really counterintuitive to how you would normally play the game. And on Legendary, it's cancer. It was not fun. The first time was really hard, like one-on-one with it, but then once it adds in a bunch of other stuff, fuck the Warden. It genuinely was the worst part of Halo 5. Other than that, the gunplay and the actual like mechanics of like the thrusters and everything is so much fun. This game just really stumbled around, and you'd think they would have learned from the first one, but they only added shit that was worse. They added microtransactions to the multiplayer, which was just horrendous. Absolutely egregious. I don't think that's okay in any game that's not free from the get-go. This was a $60 game at launch. Hopefully they figure out what they're doing when they go into Infinite from that, but it doesn't get a free pass. So, Bakadere. This game is fucking floundering around. It's a fool most of the time. When I think back on it, I think about how dumb a lot of the stuff was. But I still do love it. I still do think the game was good to an extent. I wouldn't say it's a bad game. It's probably like a 7. It still holds up, still playable. I'd play it to this day. There's no flood in it, so that makes it good. They made the Prometheans even more fun to fight other than the Warden. The Covenant are also in it. Overall, it's just a fun game. The multiplayer is fun. There's new additions to it. It expands on what you already like. So yeah, that's all of the mainline titles from this series. Hopefully Halo Infinite, which hasn't come out as of the time of this video, is good. Hopefully it does everything right. It seems like they're on the right path with delaying it and taking their time to really fix things, with the community being so vocal about the problems with it. And hopefully it comes out great. I'm really hoping it just knocks it out of the park, and the story is phenomenal. They need a win on this one because they have floundered. They haven't really hit a home run yet with Halo 4 or 5, but they have been solid foundations. So I think the possibility of this being a banger of a game is not out of left field if it does happen. I am absolutely playing this day one when it comes out. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like on it. Share it around with anybody you think would be interested. Have you played the Halo series? Was I pretty close to describing each one of them, or am I way off the mark? Am I a total fucking idiot? Possible on both of those. Other than that, subscribe if you haven't already. I don't know why you would watch the end of this video and not already be subscribed. You out of your mind. Otherwise, that's all I really have to talk about for today. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!